just because I started the recording button, I'm going to reintroduce ourselves. So this webinar is on what to do with your data. My name is Laura Cisneros. I work with the Natural Resources Conservation Academy programs and have helped a variety of participants organize their data and analyze their data for a variety of projects. And Nicole, could you introduce yourself once again?
This is Nicole Fringfeld, Program Coordinator for the Conservation Training Partnerships. And I'm excited to talk to you guys about data today.
So just to start off with the benefits of doing proper data collection and management, most of you have already in the working on your projects and collecting data, but you can always use these procedures that we'll present to you for future projects or even to start using in your project right now. But the benefits to this is to ensure that you're accurately collecting data and that it's complete. That will help you address your questions that you want to ask. It also minimizes risk of losing your data later on. And then finally, it also helps you share your project and perhaps the organizations that you're working with want to collaborate with future students and build off your project, or collaborate with other organizations and do a similar project in another location. So it's really important for sharing and collaboration. And finally, by sharing and collaborating, this increases the impact of your work. Your data go beyond just your project.
Okay, so the outline for this evening's webinar, we're going to go over quickly the different types of data that you might be collecting in your project. Talk about different data collection programs and apps that you might be using. Go over a little bit of unfamiliar file types. Then we're going to talk about Google Drive, and then we're going to show you a lot about how to use Google Drive. And then at the very end, we're going to go over data do's and don'ts. So to get started with types of data that you may or may not be collecting, really it depends on the project that you are conducting. A lot of folks would be collecting form data. So for example, things like if you're measuring water quality in a stream or lake, or if you're identifying invasive plant species, that type of data would get entered into a form. You also might be collecting some map or GIS, GPS data. Oftentimes it's not thought of, but photographs and videos are actually data, especially if you're using a camera trap to monitor for wildlife. That is your data, those pictures. And in addition to some acoustic or audio recordings, we know we have projects currently going on that are collecting audio data. That's very exciting. Bats, birds, you name it. And then another type of data that you may not have heard about before is called metadata. And that is data that describes other environmental features and survey methods. Laura's going to talk a little bit more specifically about metadata. Oh, sorry. That's coming up. Form data, just to give an example, sometimes your form data is actually just written in a notebook, handwritten. You're out in the field, you're collecting data and taking notes, and that is a great example of form data. Some of you are using EpiCollect forms to collect your data, and that's a really nice organized way. Say you want to, you've got your phone handy and you want to just enter it right into your EpiCollect form. So that's another way. And then you can turn your EpiCollect data form into a file using Microsoft Excel. And that's another type of form data. Just an example here, map GIS data. Some of you might be familiar with the TrackKit app, and this is just a screenshot of that showing that kind of data. A couple photos and folks analyzing photos and videos and audio files. And now here's the metadata part.
All right, so metadata, and you might be saying, meta what? Yeah, metadata is really, really important. And what I want you to ask you all to do is, with the data that you have now, I want you to look at it and ask yourself, if a friend looked at this data right now, would they know what I'm talking about? And likely data on their own, let's say water quality data, someone's not going to understand what your project is. And so metadata is a set of data that describes and gives information about the other data you're collecting. So what might this be? I'm going to talk about that. So give you some examples in a second, but beyond these examples, metadata can be a variety of type of information that you're recording, and you really want to think about your data living past the life of just your project. So more information you can record about your data, the better. So some examples of metadata, you want to typically record who's collecting the data, so your name, your teammate's name, anyone else that might be out helping to collect your data, date and time, the name of your location that you might be collecting it, and also describing other factors about location, town, state, even writing down the lat long or the file name of that GPS location that you took, and also recording things about the weather that might impact the results that you're seeing. Some other things to consider, you might want to create a file for your project that describes your data collection methods. So the equipment you're using, the instructions for how you went about to collect that data. Again, you want to describe environmental conditions. This can go beyond weather. You can describe natural environmental variables like vegetation, land cover, habitat type, elevation. And then you also want to think about potentially human-produced variables that might impact your data. So are you seeing any pollution? What's the land use that you're collecting your data in? Is it urban, agriculture, pasture, etc.? And some of these things may be applicable to your project, some of them may not. So it's really going to be, again, dependent on what your project is. Finally, other things to think about recording are units of measurements you're taking, any acronyms that you might be using that might just, you may use an acronym or abbreviation for the species or organisms you're working with or your site locations. Think of it again from the perspective of Joe Schmo walking on the street, making sure that they can understand your data if they were to look at your spreadsheet or any of your documents. And then finally, you may have missing variable or data, and that's fine, that happens. But just providing an explanation why you didn't collect some data in one spot and you did in another spot is really, really important.
Okay, here's just a list of some data collection apps and programs that you might already be familiar with, especially those of you in CTP. Like we showed the picture of before, a good old-fashioned notebook, handwritten, is great for collecting data. You might want to take pictures of your notebook as a backup method though. EpiCollect 5, it's that form app, track kit for mapping. You might use GPS device and ArcGIS Online. You might use Google Maps for your mapping data. Some different acoustic programs like Sonobat or Raven Light. And then again, your camera can be a really valuable data collection tool, either through your phone, a trail camera, the 360 camera, or a video camera. I just wanted to point out a couple of different unfamiliar file types. So especially if you're using EpiCollect, comma separated values, you'll see the little, what is that, suffix? The file is .csv, and a CSV file can be opened with a few different types of software. So a basic text editor like a notepad program or spreadsheet software such as Excel or Google Sheets can open a comma-separated value file. And it really is just usually columns of data that are separated by commas. And then when you open it, depending on which program you use, it's actually organized into real columns and you don't see the commas. A few other types, if you're working with map or GIS data, some file types that might be unfamiliar to you. Keyhole markup language, that's shown with a .kml after your file name, and GPS exchange format, which is a .gpx file name. And you don't need to know those terms, keyhole markup language. You just need to recognize that if you see .kml or .gpx, that is going to be mapping data. So those types of files can be opened with mapping software, so something like ArcGIS Online or Google Maps. Google Maps, I think, is specific to KML files, but that's okay. If you have a GPX file and you Google convert GPX to KML, you'll probably find 1,000 websites that pop up and an online converter. So if you need to convert between the two file types, it's free and you're able to do it online.
Yeah, and I'll just add that when you do download a .kml or a .gpx folder, past participants have downloaded it and tried to open it and then get frustrated that they can't open it. You won't be able to open it. You'll just be able to upload it into Google Maps or ArcGIS Online, and then through those programs, you'll be able to view your data.
Right, it's not, you likely don't have a program on your computer that can open those files. The files themselves would need to be uploaded first. Just a little note about unfamiliar file types. This again, especially applies to EpiCollect. Sometimes when you go to download your data, it comes as a zipped file, and the file format for that is .zip. And what ends up happening then, you have to basically unzip that folder and extract the files before you can use them. It's just a way that the files get compressed in order to download them faster. They're a smaller file size, but when you extract them, they become their original files, and then you can use them.
All right, so I just want to pause. We've had a couple of people join us and remind everyone, feel free to ask us questions in the chat box. If you could mute yourself, so at the top of the console, there's a microphone, and you can hit that to mute yourself just so that we don't get any funny feedback. But so far, I think we're good, but feel free to, again, send any messages, any questions in the chat box. So at this point, we told you about a variety of data forms you might have and a variety of programs you might be working with, and you might be thinking, what do I do? How do I keep track of all of this? Don't panic. We're going to show you our superheroes, Google Drive to the rescue, how you can organize and keep track of all that data. Okay, so Google Drive. If you want to get organized and stay organized, Google Drive's for you. If you want to share and collaborate your data with your community partner or your other teammates, again, Google Drive's for you. And then finally, right now, we're going to show you how Google Drive's going to become your best friend. So we're going to show you 3 simple steps, how you can create a project folder, how you can share this project folder with your teammates, and most importantly, the NRCA coordinators. So depending on who your NRCA coordinator, you're going to want to share it with them. And then finally, we're going to go into depth on how you should organize, or an example of how you can organize your data with some example data that we have. So I am going to exit out of here, and we are going to go to our Google Drive. So we have set up a Google Drive for this webinar, which we will share with all of you so that you can have this example reference going forward. First, I'm going to show you a project folder that we've created. the scenario is that me and Nicole want to study biodiversity at multiple sites, and we have right now dumped all our data into a project folder. So this is a question for you all. Just skimming through this project folder, does this data make sense to you? Do you feel happy right now looking at this data? Ooh, there's some cool deer. Thoughts? To me, this does not make me happy. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what this, if I wasn't familiar with KML, I'd click on this and be like, KML, what? Oh my gosh, I have no idea what this is. So we are going to show you, that's an example of a disorganized, oh yeah, Terry, that doesn't make you happy? Yeah, doesn't make me happy either. So we are going to show you how to organize your data using Google Drive. All right.
Okay.
First, we'll show you how to create a folder.
Creating a folder, very easy. And oh, I should have made a slide for this, but you can have a Google Drive account without using Gmail. You don't need Gmail to have Google Drive. It's free. Anybody can use it. I had meant to point that out earlier. So let's say we want to create our project folder. It's as easy as hitting this button that says New Folder. That's it. And then give it a title. So we're going to call this Project Folder. Easy peasy. Step 2, if you right click on your project folder and go to Share, this little box pops up, and here you can change the permissions for this folder so you can allow people to view it. But if you want to collaborate and say share it with your teammates or your NRCA coordinator, make sure you select that anyone that you're sharing with can edit so that they can make changes, they can add files, they can work on it with you. So then you can just start typing their names, and hopefully if they're in your contact list, they'll come up. And then you can share with them that way. This will send a little message to myself and Laura that now this folder has been shared with us. Another way to share, I just want to point out, is that you can get a link to your folder, and this link automatically gets copied to your, oh, 115 does not go for her. I believe that, Lori.
Sorry, we have a question that we're looking at. So Lori says, be careful though if doing a lot of acoustic, so if you have like large file size, you can quickly fill up your Google Drive space.
So yeah, you're given 15 gigabytes of space. I would say, and I actually don't know, it does say here there's an option to upgrade your storage. I expect that costs money.
Yes,
if I can,
yeah, so I don't know.
Oh, we've got someone speaking.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
If I can interject, what it was is we found that with kids, they had already had a lot of stuff in their personal file, like their own photos and videos, and then we started adding the WAV files, so it quickly used all the gigabytes up. So maybe, I think there's ways to create like a separate Gmail account just for your project that you're going to do. There might be.
Yeah, that's a really great idea. Creating a separate account if you have large files that you're dealing with. Thank you, Lori.
Thanks. So that was just sharing this. Again, you can get a link to share, and then you could send it through your own email, a link to that folder. And again, through this, this just says view. So you might want to change that to getting a shareable link that you can edit, and now it changes the link. You can copy it to your clipboard and send that. Within this project folder, what you'll want to do right away is create a brand new Google Doc, and it'll ask you if you want to share that because it's a shared folder. Yes, you do. And this Google Doc will be our project notes that Laura talked about, keeping track of all that metadata and really important information here. Again, all of your teammates or collaborators, your NRCA coordinators can see this document, can make changes to it, can make comments, and that really enables the collaboration. Great. Okay.
All right, so now we are going to show you how you can organize all your various types of data. So we've created this project folder for our biodiversity project, and this is just a quick example of what you can do or what you should be thinking of doing to organize the different components of your project. So for example, we organize all the data into a variety of folders. First, we have this project notes, and I'm going to open this up so you can get an example of what to put in your notes. So I suggest starting off your project notes with a description of who's involved in this project and how to contact you. So if you ever share this project with somebody else and they have a question about any of the method details or any of your data or analyses, they can contact you or your community partner and figure those out. Then you might want to have a section where you describe where your data is stored. And so in this section, I provided the link for this general folder, this biodiversity folder that I created, so that if I ever shared this Word document or it's a Google document with somebody else, they could always just click on that link and access all the data. Then I also describe what's in there, so that I describe that there's a master spreadsheet with all the data entered into it. We have a photo with videos or photos of us collecting data. So that's something else to think about while you're out there in the field. Take photos of you collecting the data, because that can help someone visualize how you set up whatever aspect of your project or what the environment looked like where you're collecting your data. It's also going to be very helpful if you're putting together a poster to present at a conference or a story map. So if you haven't collected any photos of you collecting your data, go out there and even do a demo and just stage some photos. It can be very helpful for later on. And then we created a series of subfolders. So for this example project, we collected biodiversity in 3 different sites: an edge site, a forest site, and a riparian site. And we stored all of our data was collected at the edge site into the edge subfolder, all the data that was collected at the forest site into the forest subfolder, etc. And this type of data consisted of camera trap photos, acoustic files, we were studying bats there, all the GPS locations of where we moved our camera trap or where we were doing acoustic calls or recordings. We took some photos of our survey locations so that someone could visualize what the location looked like. And finally, we included some more metadata within those subfolders about the environment, or the weather on that day of data collection, exact description of how to walk and navigate to the site that we put the camera traps, etc. And everything, as you'll see, is organized by date. So I'm gonna go out and show you those subfolders in a second. Before I do that, I also wanted to point out that we have a folder that's also called products and results from the project that we store as well. So that's something you're going to want to think about as you near the end of your project. remember to record and all the various products that are coming out of your project. In this project notes, we also wrote what the goal was for our project. We described the location. And for the location, we have a variety of KML files or even a CSV file with the lat long of our locations. And in this description, I describe how someone can go and access those data. And then finally, we write some example of our methods. And this is something that can be ongoing that I would encourage you to start now. You might not know what you're doing for your entire project, and you might be modifying as you go along, but you can start writing quick bullet points, such as we monitored biodiversity at edge, forest, and riparian habitat. And then as you go about doing it, you can describe how you did set up your project design, and then each date you go out to collect data, make a note of it. So on March 23rd, 2014, we set out these camera traps. On March 30th, we moved it. So it can be as simple as that, just to keep a record of what happened, because come the time you're making your poster, you might forget a lot of what you did, and this will be an easy record of copying and pasting and putting into your poster. In this document, you could also describe any analyses you do and also report any sort of projects or products that are coming out. You could put the links so that someone can easily go and access those. And so I provide a variety of examples here, but I'm not going to go through all of them since you'll have access to this document later on. So then to quickly show you some other things, as I mentioned, each site had a subfolder, so I'm just going to go into one, the riparian one, as an example. I organized each of the camera traps were moved to different locations, so we took a waypoint at each of those locations. So the KML files are stored in one folder, and then in each of these other folders are data from, these are acoustic calls, all grouped into one folder. And you can see that I named the folders in a descriptive manner so that we understand what's in there. So this was taken at the riparian site, it's acoustic data, and here's the date that those acoustic calls were recorded. So on 9/19/2018. I did this for the camera trap data. So it's organized by each data, or each time we put the camera trap out. That's not a fun one. Here's a fun one. Coyote. So, and then finally, you can put pictures of your sites. So I'd encourage you to take as many pictures and include them in there, just so you have a thorough record of what the sites looked like when you were doing whatever. And then finally, you might have metadata. So you might type these in later on. So maybe you forgot to record anything, but based on your memory, you can go back and write as much that you can remember about when you were collecting your data. Or you might have field notes, and you could just take a picture and throw that in here, so that's all together. Finally, once you organize all your data and you're starting to analyze it, you might want to create a spreadsheet and start to enter in all the various parts of your data so it's easier to analyze. Again, this is just an example, so it's combining all that metadata together and then starting to look at that camera trap data. And then finally, you're going to want to create a folder to show any products that you made. So for example, you might want to put your poster that you're going to showcase at a conference. Maybe if you made a brochure or some other products, you want to show that. And then finally, as I mentioned, put up pictures showing you setting up your equipment so that, again, you can use it for your poster. It can help us visualize what you were doing. You can even do videos. Oh, we have a question. So Lori asked, do you know if panoramic photos work in a story map? Lori, I don't think panoramic photos work, but if you use 360 camera, you can get that to work in a story map. So this is just a fun example of putting a video of you collecting your data. All right, so that is just an example of how to start organizing all of your data.
Okay, a couple other things I want to point out. And I'm going to use the outline that we came up with as an example. So this is a Google Doc of our webinar outline. And one of my favorite features of the Google Drive and Google Docs is that multiple people can work on one document at the same time. And you can actually see, we don't have anybody doing it right now, but you could actually see your teammate typing in real time. What's really cool also is that you can see previous versions of this file as it's changed over time. So let's say you make a giant mistake and delete a whole section, but don't realize it for a few days, and then you start to panic. Don't panic. You can go into File and then look at Version History, and here, see Version History. It shows you in a timeline.
You can minimize that.
Over here on the right side, all the dates and times that little snapshots of your file were taken, and you can go back to those versions in time, and you can see who made the changes. So looking at it right now, this was at 2:45 today. If you hover over this highlighted section, our NRCA account, that was me earlier, made these changes, and most of that was in the NRCA account. But then when we get down to the bottom, this one's highlighted in a different color, and you can see that's my personal Yukon account making those changes there. So you can go back and look at, oh, what did this outline look like yesterday morning? It has changed some since then. You can see things got crossed off and added. So it's just it's pretty amazing way to recover any mistakes or just see who's been working on the file since the last time you worked on it. Let's now talk a little bit about, so that was Google Docs. Let's talk about Google Sheets. Laura showed you an example of how you can create a data sheet to type data directly in. You can even print it out and handwrite your data. Right now I'm going to show you, say you downloaded some data from an EpiCollect form. I'm going to show you how you can add that to your, well, let's go into our project folder and select New and File Upload. Oh, NRCA.
So right now, Nicole's navigating to where she keeps her the spreadsheet.
We are in the data management webinar, and here is our, remember, our CSV, comma separated values file that I downloaded earlier from EpiCollect. And that just got uploaded into our Google folder here. And what I recommend doing, if you right-click on this, you can say that you want to open it with Google Sheets because it's a comma separated values file. Google Sheets will know what to do with that. And whoa, there's a whole lot of data there. One of the things about EpiCollect is that it creates this initial column here that looks kind of like gobbledygook, and it's just sort of a unique identifier, I think, for that data point. Not really something that you need to concern yourself with, and looking at it might scare you, so don't panic when you see those letters and numbers. One thing I want to point out, the very first thing you should do after you upload a file into your Google Drive, especially if it's a data file like this, is to copy this sheet, your original raw data, so now we have a copy of it here that we can work with and make changes to. Keep this an original one untouched. That's always there as a backup. If we switch to the copy, now we can make changes to it and feel comfortable that we have a backup going forward. I'm going to use another example, one that I've already done that for. So this is some data that was from EpiCollect here. So I've got my tab, data from EpiCollect. It's got those weird column headers here. It looks a little messy. So what I did was organize that data a bit better. Got rid of the things I didn't need. I made things just a little cleaner. I also included, if you look here, the EpiCollect was from July 2019, July 31st. Some of this data was actually collected not in EpiCollect, so that got typed in by hand. I want to point out this column here that I highlighted with conductivity to show a really common error with data entry. So when you're using a file like this, Google Sheets or Google Excel, it's a real big no-no here to type your units within the column. So if you see here for my total dissolved solids, I've got my units just in parentheses here, which is how I've done all the other data, and that's how my conductivity should be. If you have units included in the cell with your number, you can't do much with that data as it is because the program won't recognize it as a number. So here's my nice happy green column here with my just numbers, my units up at the top where they belong. I made a spreadsheet just for the conductivity data to show you how easy it is to make a graph of your data. And in this situation, water quality was collected from a few different locations in a few different lakes at 2 different time points. So what we can do is just copy some of this over. I get really particular about not messing with things, and I always make copies of copies. So here we've got our time point of June 30th. So I'm going to put that up for that column, and then our July 31st. And I'm going to highlight that data and copy it over using Control-C and Control-V. So now I've got it organized with date. And if you had more dates, you could keep them going along this top row, and then you could have your conductivity data in columns, so you could show changes over time. If you highlight your data and then select Insert Chart, we've got a nice figure bar chart here showing with the different lakes across your x-axis and the 2 different time points where the conductivity was measured, and then conductivity here on our y-axis. You will need to play around a little bit to add some labels. It's always nice to say what your y-axis is, and probably change this title. Instead of the dates, you could say conductivity, just to get an idea of how easy it is to make a graph in Google Sheets.
And something to note is sometimes it's going to take playing around with reorganizing your data in columns and rows, just like Nicole did, to get the graph that best conveys what you're trying to show.
Yes, so just to point out, if we had tried selecting all of this and done insert chart, it gets a little confused. It's saying, oh my gosh, what's happening here? I don't know, dates now on the bottom, conductivity, where are my lakes? So and this is the kind of thing that just playing around with it and trying different combinations, also Googling how to make a graph can be really, really helpful. Or, you know, emailing your NRCA coordinator and asking. Oops. Okay.
Great. Okay, so we can pause for any questions. If anyone has some, I'll wait a little bit, so feel free to ask a question.
So we're here. Yep.
All right.
Oh, and this, just to point out, this file will stay in that folder. So with the graph example, so you can use that if you're going to be making a similar graph, you can always refer to this to see how I did it, and hopefully that'll help you.
Yep. So we're going to click out without even hitting anything to save it, which, I never do when I'm closing out a document. But you can do it and open it back up and see all those changes that Nicole just made. Let's see.
Fingers crossed.
Graph's still there.
Yeah, that's
good.
The beauty of Google Docs.
Yep. Okay. So if you use Google Docs or Google Drive often, you probably have a lot of documents in there and things might get lost. So to keep track of your project folder, what you'll want to do is, again, you can right click on it, the folder that you want to share. You can get a shareable link. I'm going to get a version that I can edit. So right click and click can edit. I'm going to copy this, and you can paste it into a web browser and then bookmark it by just dragging that into your bookmarks. That's one way, so that you can always go back to that bookmark. Another way is to, if I close out of this, if I go back to my project folder, right click on it and click add to starred. Now it's starred. Whenever I go to my drive and, oh my gosh, look at all these documents, where am I going to find that folder? If I just go to on the left hand side, you'll see the starred tab, and hey, it's not there. Hang on, let me go start it again. 1 second. Okay, right click on it. I'm going to add it to starred. Okay, now that little star is there. Make sure the star is there before you click out of it. Then when I go to starred, there's my project folder, and I can find it from then on. So if someone shares a folder with you, it might get lost. You can go to share with me and look for there, but I encourage you to star whatever your important project folders are. They may be ones that you made or people shared with you, and you can always find it in this section. So, and then finally, I'm going to just reiterate this, a point that Nicole made. Make sure to share this and share with, again, all your teammates, anyone that might be interested in this project, and especially the NRCA coordinators. And then also, even though you may be making changes to documents and someone can look at the version history and see that you've made documents or made changes, whenever you make changes, don't count on someone to know that you made changes. I would send them a friendly reminder saying, oh, I updated the project notes, or if you're working on your poster, let them know that, oh, I updated the poster slide. Can you check over my edits? So just to keep that in mind.
What's neat, it will show you there on the right hand part of the screen the last time that file or folder was modified. So,
oh yeah,
you know, it is helpful to look at that because maybe someone has changed it since the last time you accessed it and nobody told you. So you could see that very easily when you look at that date. We've got just a few last points to go over under our data do's and don'ts. And I'm going to start with the do's. So first thing you should do, you should either dedicate one person as basically the sole data collector, the person that is in charge of data collection, or, and I kind of lean towards the or on this one, make sure everyone in your team is collecting the data, because the more people that collect it, even though it seems redundant, I think the safer it is. Yes, you've got backups and backups to backups. So that's never a bad thing. Especially when you're using apps and different programs, we highly recommend that you save and upload your data often. I know sometimes with some of the apps you need to have Wi-Fi in order to upload, and that's okay, just as long as things are saved on your device, and that once you get to Wi-Fi, you make sure that you upload it. It's easy to stay organized if you start off organized. So we really do recommend, like as soon as you begin a project, you take these steps that we recommended so that you start off on a good foot and you keep that going.
And even if you're right now, your data's all over the place, that's all right. You know, in the next couple of days, start pulling the pieces together just so that's all in one spot and not on multiple devices and multiple computers, etc.
Right, right. And lastly, do ask for help or ideas. If you don't know how to do something, you don't know how to open a certain type of file, you don't know how to download or upload a file, we are here to help you. Google is there to help you also. I basically Google questions every day on how to do things with data, and can always find answers.
And then finally, just a couple don'ts. One being, don't assume that someone else on your team is keeping track of your data or recording the data. We've had a couple cases where someone thought someone else was recording it, and when they were pulling all the data together, only to find out they were missing data from a site or from a couple days. It's not the end of the world. You can always go back out there and collect some more data or figure out some analyses around it. But like Nicole said, having multiple people recording the same data lets you have multiple copies of that data. And then also make sure not to delete stuff. You'd never know when it might come in handy, so it's better to create a folder that has extra miscellaneous stuff, or maybe previous versions of your of a spreadsheet. And you can, you know, make when you're making new spreadsheets of your data, label them accordingly. So put the latest date that you edited that spreadsheet, so that you know which spreadsheet was the most recent one. Or other people might have suggestions as well. And that brings us to the end. So we will open this up for any questions that you guys have. Feel free to stay on the line. We also are going to share all of these resources that are in our Google Drive. You can find them at this link, which is s.uconn.edu/data management example.